You're listening to WMPG 90.9 Gorham, Portland, Southern Maine Community Radio from USM. Live from the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way galaxy, this is Scientifically Speaking, a weekly half-hour program devoted to elegant curiosities, and I am one of your hosts, Sarah Chang. Joining me, as always, is Bernie Rhyme, DJ Starwatcher. How are you, Bernie?
Yes, hi, Sarah. Very good, thank you.
Bernie is our professor of the astronomy lab here at USM and our local protector of the night skies. Reach out to us at WMPGScientificallySpeaking@gmail.com or on Twitter at WMPGSciSpeak. And you can head over to WMPG.org to find the last 5 weeks of archives of all of your favorite shows, including this one. Bernie, could you let our listeners know what is up in the night sky for this coming week?
Yes, certainly. So this will be Friday, May 13th. So Friday the 13th. And we have a great week coming up, lots of interesting events. So we'll start with the conjunctions. Venus and Jupiter will still be fairly close. They're getting a little further apart. I saw them a few days ago. They were just a half a degree apart at 4:30 in the morning. So get up early and you'll see Saturn and Mars also, but they're going to be a lot fainter. But the main thing, of course, will be the total lunar eclipse starting on Sunday the 15th, going into Monday morning the 16th. So this is the flower, milk, or planting moon. And it's going to be one of the longest lunar eclipses possible because the moon is close to perigee, so it's closer to the Earth when you can see this. So basically, it's going to go into our shadow starting at 9:32 p.m., but you really won't notice much because that's called the penumbral, the thin part of the shadow, unless you have like a big telephoto lens or a telescope. So when you should really start looking, when you see the obvious phases starting, will be 10:27 p.m. So then it'll be completely immersed in our shadow from 11:29 to 12:53 a.m. and not completely exit the penumbra until 2:50 a.m., which is about 10 minutes before Saturn comes up and the rest of the parade of the morning planets breaking the eastern horizon or so an hour later, so around 4 o'clock. So, but you should also be aware, I mean, the timing's good. The one in November was like 4 in the morning and it wasn't even completely total and it wasn't even really clear. A few people caught it like west of us. But as long as it's clear, this is a good timing. The best time will be just after midnight, but start watching around 10:30. So every lunar eclipse is always unique and distinct. The exact colors range from a light orange to a deeper coppery oranges to all shades of red to dark gray to almost black and disappearing from our sight. So that would depend on the exact clarity of our atmosphere. I remember the totally eclipsed moon becoming almost invisible in late 1991. After a series of eruptions of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines earlier that year, left a lot of volcanic ash in our atmosphere. So I don't know if any of you remember that, but it also caused some really neat sunsets. They were almost like northern lights. I remember I just started teaching astronomy at Adult Ed in York in the early 90s, and just looking at the sunsets, I wasn't really even sure what causing them, but they were like shifting and moving, and the colors, I mean, it's nice to have a good sunset, but they were just shifting even if there were no clouds. So that caused a really dark lunar eclipse. So a good way to see that this neat orange color that you're going to see, so a more dramatic way of looking at that would be that those shifting hues of orange and red, they're created by our atmosphere bending or the reflecting the sunlight back onto the natural satellite to see what's really happening. So what you're seeing is the combined effect of all the sunrises and sunsets on Earth projected onto the moon at the same time.
Oh.
Yeah, so and I just found this out maybe about 10 years ago. I used to watch eclipses, they were always enthralling and I got some good pictures, but you can almost see it more four-dimensionally when you're seeing the shadows and how they intersect, when you're seeing everything at once. So the neat thing about that, we saw the solar eclipse. So you're just about seeing the opposite of that. So when you see that 360-degree circle of orange twilight all around you, so I saw it in the high plateau of Idaho and you saw it from Illinois. So we're completely immersed at the bottom of the lunar shadow cone, and we just barely managed to reach the Earth. So picture the opposite of this, and that's why you're seeing that refracted sunlight back on the moon as it goes through our shadow. So it looks really three-dimensional. It looks like you can touch it. It's only 1 second away at the speed of light. It's 240,000 miles away, but almost in a sense you really can touch it. So there's a lot of neat, subtle things to look for and try to photograph during this lunar eclipse coming up.
Wow. That sounds exciting. Okay, remind us the date again.
It's going to start Sunday night, May 15th, so in 2 days. Yeah, Saturday is the 14th. and about 10:30, start watching. It starts earlier, but you won't see much. And it'll be right in deep part of the shadow from 11:30 to almost 1, which is usually an hour, so it's going to be more like 90 minutes. And then it's going to exit that part at about 1:30. It's not over till almost 3, but you won't see anything after about 1:30. So the best time, if you don't have the whole time to look at it, would be around midnight.
Awesome.
Sunday night, 15th.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll have good seeing.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be clear, and then you can see all those neat things and the combined effect of all the sunrises, and the opposite end of the solar eclipse, and all those type of neat things. Yeah.
Also, Bernie, I just have to mention,
yeah.
When you were talking about that, you were like, I just learned this, and then you said about 10 years ago.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I just wanted to say that, when I first started watching eclipses, they were neat, but, it's nice and red, big deal. But knowing that it's how this works to the physics and you get all the sunrises, I just learned it 10 years ago. Well, even the night coming on, you get that nice purplish gray. And I probably learned that about 15 years ago. So after I started doing astronomy 40 years ago. So I only learned that about 15 or maybe 20 years ago. It's the shadow projected back to us off the atmosphere. We can see 2 eclipses every single day.
Really cool. Yeah.
But people aren't really aware of that. We don't have to wait till these great events like lunar and solar things, twice a year if we're lucky. Twice a day we can see some version of that.
Bernie, we are so lucky to have your enthusiasm for this.
Oh, good. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, well. Okay. The way you said that.
No, and
no, I know you mean it.
It also just makes me laugh because, we talk about kind of time in astronomy and how it's just so different. And you're just like, I just learned it 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, right. Like that's like 10 seconds ago. Exactly. Right. No, I mean, even good. I mean, I'm not professionally a scientist, but even like an amateur scientist, we always want to keep learning and see things like richer and more dimensions and all these things, and that's always going on.
Yep.
Yeah. So I just learned it 10 years ago.
Yep. Excellent. That will now be part of my regular.
Good.
Vernacular, I guess. The way I talk about time.
Yeah. Okay.
I just learned this.
I just learned it. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bernie.
Yeah,
and if you could not take notes fast enough, you can also check out the monthly What's Up column in the Portland Press Herald. And we will all be out there, hopefully if the sky is clear, at approximately 10:30 watching the lunar eclipse. All right. So welcome to another episode of Scientifically Speaking. Today is Friday the 13th. I feel like I fumbled that. Friday the 13th. Yay, it's May 13th. And we thought we would spend today's show talking about superstitions, and we'll highlight quite a few different superstitions related to astronomy or astronomical events, a couple other kind of math related ones here and there, but for the most part we are focusing on astronomy related superstitions. And then at the end of the show, we'll kind of talk about how harmful some of these might be, or, maybe not harmful, and what we can do to try to maybe combat some of these harmful ones. I don't think any of the ones we talk about today are harmful, though. So this is all kind of in.
It depends on what you believe anyway.
Yes.
None of them are actually, harmful or not harmful.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, let's start with the number 13, because that's why we're doing this show. Yeah. Why exactly is 13 kind of
well, I'm not sure, but in other cultures it's a different number. Like I think even in Japan, they don't have a lot of hotels with that other numbered floor. I don't know what the number is. Four. Okay, yeah.
It's usually 4, yeah.
And that alone should tell you something too, that it's not an absolute, fundamental anything.
Yeah.
It's just superstition. So why is it 13 for our culture?
I have no idea.
I thought you knew that. You thought you were asking me and you would give me the answer.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, why? I don't actually know. I probably knew at some point. Like I just learned it 10 years ago, and I've also just forgotten.
All right, 10 years ago. Yeah.
But So let's start with some of your superstitions that
Yeah.
you kind of came across.
Okay, so when I looked up a few that were related to astronomy, a couple of them surprised me. So one would be simply it's bad luck to attempt to count the stars, which is
Huh.
kind of strange. I mean, I suppose just technically you can see 6,000 stars on a good night, so you'd
Yeah.
be out there for a long time trying to count them. But if you try to count them, I don't know up to what number, but that's supposed to be bad luck. So don't physically just, start counting the stars. So that's one of them.
I wonder if it's bad luck because you're basically never going to count all of them. And
Hmm.
so it's bad luck because then you'll just die trying to count them.
Well, actually, if you go, I mean, obviously you can count to 6,000, but if you count all of them, you won't live long enough because there's only about 1 billion seconds in 30 years, and there's 200 billion stars. So most people live only 2 to 3 billion seconds. So even if you, every second, if you count a star, even, 5 stars per second, you're only going to get to 15 billion. You won't even get our own galaxy. So yeah, based on that, right. So don't start. But you need a telescope. You can only see 6,000. But there's 200 billion, and you're not going to live that many seconds.
All right, we've just fought this. Well,
Yeah,
I guess they probably are also use logic to
yeah,
talk about why you shouldn't do this.
yeah. So I mean, that's our reason for that because I just saw the superstition. So another one, somewhat related, is also bad luck to point at a star because in some cultures, a star was like an ancestor or a person. So you're not supposed to just point
Oh,
at a stranger in a train station, and they might get upset or whatever else. So that's why you're not supposed to point at a star because if some ancestor, even though obviously it's going to be 10 light years or further away from you, you're
yeah.
not supposed to point at it. But I think that's really silly because if you want to point it out to somebody else, you should point at it, and nothing's going to happen to you if you point at a star.
What if you use the big laser
Well, yeah,
or the
that's right.
laser pointer?
Lasers. I do that all the time with the lasers.
No,
Yeah.
like burning them.
Well, yeah, but the laser goes 5 miles and the star is 20 light years. You're not getting very close to it. But it is bad luck to point a laser at a person, so that would be
Yeah.
bad.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I don't
yeah,
know if that's bad luck. That's just bad.
they'll come after you, especially if they're looking at it. So yeah, that's a good analogy to make. Okay, so you have a few of them.
So I actually have a bunch on the moon,
Hmm.
and I mean the moon is our own kind of satellite. Kind of, it is our satellite. And actually speaking of what you were just talking about with the lunar eclipse, there were some people I think who described that as like a monster devouring the moon.
Mm.
And that's actually the probably the most likely the eclipse.
Mm.
So one of the superstitions is to not go out during the solar eclipse, I believe. I don't
Right, just
actually think
the
it's
total part of it,
yeah.
which is
Yeah.
ironic because it's the only time it's totally safe to look at it. It's the most dramatic part, and you're not supposed to go out in it. And a lot of
Yes.
people still believe that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mexico City, for instance. Yeah.
Right. And so it is believed that pregnant women
Mhm.
who do, go outside and see, or just are outside while an eclipse is in progress, they
Yeah.
could cause their baby to have like facial deformities or birthmarks. I don't know what's wrong with birthmarks, but I guess bad birthmarks. And we don't really know like why, but we wonder if it has something to do with like eclipse blindness,
Mhm.
and maybe they just think that that will
Well,
somehow
yeah. If
happen.
you as a person look at it, yeah, but not
Right.
an unborn baby.
Yes.
No problem. Totally safe.
Right. But scientifically, there are really no proven eclipse related health concerns specific to pregnant women or their babies.
No.
So, yeah, just go outside and enjoy it
Yeah.
regardless.
'Cause they were worried about pets for the last solar eclipse, remember?
Yep.
And a pet normally wouldn't be staring at the sun anyway.
Yep.
So they're totally safe. You don't have to get eclipse glasses for your dog or cat. You could. It'd be kind of fun. I think some people probably did that.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you had one on making wishes.
Yeah. So one of them obviously would be the starlight, star bright, make a wish on the star tonight, something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
so obviously, you can do that anytime. However, the problem will be usually the first bright thing you will see would be a planet. It wouldn't be a star. Like for instance, when I saw
Oh.
Venus the other morning right next to Jupiter, it was minus fourth magnitude. It was probably hundreds of times brighter than the brightest star, easily. And then even Jupiter's brighter, Mars, which is really pretty faint right now. So generally, the first thing you would see would be a planet and not a star.
Yeah.
So if you do see a bright star, like in the evening, I suppose most of the planets in the morning now, then that might kind of work. And then, of course, again, or whatever you believe if it would work or not.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah, actually, when you're talking about like, oh, the brightest thing you'll see is probably a planet 1st.
Mhm.
I do wonder because I also just learned like not that long ago
10 years ago. Yeah, right.
that they aren't stars, that they are planets, and like you don't really realize that because they all kind of look the same in the sky. And
Yeah.
I bet that is a more common misconception than
Yeah.
we probably think. So
Right. So before it's dark enough, you couldn't necessarily tell that it's in a zodiac constellation or the stars around it. You just see something and you think it's a star, but 99% of the time it'll actually be a planet.
yeah, that seems a little odd too, because we know that like, oh, shooting star, make a wish. That's a
Hmm.
little more rare, I guess, in the cities. Well, I guess if you go out rural, like really dark skies, you see them all the time. So
Yeah.
that's also probably
Right.
equally not rare, but
Yeah. So, all right. So speaking of that, the shooting stars, of course, and generally those are good luck. And even on a any clear night without the moon, if you're in a dark enough place, you can see 4 or 5 every hour. You don't have to go out during the Geminids or the
yeah,
Perseids. Of course, it's nice to know when they are. So
yeah.
you can see 4 or 5 an hour. However, and this is one I didn't know. So if you see a meteor coming in on your right side, that's supposed to be good luck. But if you see one coming in on your left side, that's bad luck. So that's even though in general meteors to see them is good luck, and of course they're interesting to see and get a
Yeah.
sense, what's happening to the atmosphere and all those things. But if you
Couldn't you
see
just
one on
like
the left,
turn around?
yeah, well, but they only last a split second, so you can turn around and see how the next one is coming in or something. You Once you see it, it's either going to be on your right or left, unless it's right down the middle somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But if you see him before a trip or something, that's going to guarantee a successful voyage. So,
Oh,
like if you leave at night and see some meteors, then you're going to have a good voyage. I mean, all this is kind of silly, really, but it's kind of nice to know that might happen.
yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then what about, let's see. So, okay, some more moon things. And I think it's, well, not more moon things. We were just talking about the eclipse, but the moon itself is also, there's tons of superstition littered around the moon.
Yeah.
I think the most common one is like the word lunacy or lunatic actually comes from like this idea that full moons make you crazy. And like that it is this full moons are associated with really odd or insane behavior, sleepwalking, apparently suicide was an associated event, illegal activity, violence, and then of course kind of the most popular is transforming into werewolves. I have no idea where that came from actually, but apparently the words lunacy, lunatic actually come from the Roman goddess of the moon, Luna, who is said to ride her silver chariot across the dark sky each night. And for thousands of years, doctors and mental health professionals believed in some kind of strong relationship between the moon and mania. And yeah, so there's a lot of kind of full moon making people loony, and that's not actually true. And Bernie, I think you actually have some stats related to kind
Yeah.
of
Well, a lot of scientists have debunked that because,
mhm,
the thing that there's more murders during a full moon or more people check into
mhm,
the emergency and so on. Actually, if it were just a physical reason, because we know the tides are higher, they're also higher at new moon. The
mm,
moon isn't visible because
yeah,
just it isn't, and then we don't have a bunch of extra weird things happening at new moon because that's when the sun and the moon line up to create the spring tides twice every month. So
yeah,
if it were just a physical reason, the same thing should happen at new moon, and it doesn't. So that alone almost disproves it right there.
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's another kind of myth around the moon is that there's kind of this idea that the moon controls fertility, also
Mhm.
with like the whole pregnancy thing.
Mhm.
And we think that the likelihood of or where that came from is because kind of menstrual cycles and lunar cycles are really similar in length. It's like 28 days ish.
Mhm.
And so a lot of early civilizations kind of believed that the moon could determine when women could become pregnant. And so there's a lot of like in mythology around the world, there's a lot of like female moon deities. And there was this guy, I guess a Czech doctor, Eugene Jonas, who kind of came across some ancient Assyrian text that was on astrology, and it stated that women are fertile during certain phases of the moon. And so he based his entire family planning method on this hypothesis. And he told patients that they were ovulating when the moon was in a certain position, etc. And there's actually very little kind of statistical evidence of moon induced baby booms, if you will. So yeah, I think science believes that any lunar effect on procreation is in our heads.
Yeah. And a lot of people that are more into astrology would say that, the human body is like 70+% water. And then when you have the extra tide, that there's some effect. However, even a huge body of water like Lake Michigan is not big enough to experience any tides. So then a little human person would certainly not be affected just by the physics of the extra gravity of a spring tide.
Yeah.
So that would rule that one out too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine if when it's low tide and all of the water in your body is up in your head or something like that.
I know, the astronauts have to worry about that in space when they're weightless, or the jet pilots at 10G or negative 10G.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but not every single full moon. We don't have to worry about that. We're
Yeah.
too small a feature to create any tides.
Right.
Even if we were a million times bigger, there'd be no tides.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You're trying to drink water and it's just
I know, the water's being pulled away from your glass. Like you're moving at 10,000 miles an hour or something. Which actually we are, but we're moving that relative with everything else. The water is not going to be relative to glass.
Yep. And then you have a couple of other moon-related ones related to the halo around the moon.
Yeah. So this was interesting. This is one I didn't know before. So so it has to do with more weather prediction and things. So if there's a halo around the moon, as you know, just a regular thing, which is true, that would mean that there would be snow or rain on the way within a day. And it's simply the cirrus clouds, and they have ice crystals, and they have to line up right. Otherwise, you don't get a halo around the moon every time you have cirrus clouds. But if they line up right, you do. So the extra step I didn't know about, if you count the number of stars visible inside that halo, which would kind of depend, what constellation the moon is in, if you're bright enough stars to see or whatever. And then that's supposed to tell you how many days of rain you're going to get and some more details about the weather, which is
so the number of stars equals the number of days?
Yeah, I think it's the direct relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's another interesting one actually about the Beehive star cluster, which is a cluster similar to the Pleiades, about 5 stars. And the Beehive is in Cancer and the Pleiades are in Taurus, so a couple constellations apart. So if you can see, if the Beehive isn't perfectly clear on basically a clear night, meaning there's probably some cirrus clouds, so that means you're going to have some rain or snow. I mean, that just kind of makes sense. The Beehive, for most of us, would be pretty hard to see clearly anyway. But if there's some cirrus clouds without causing a nice halo, around the moon or something, or even the sun can have some pretty neat halos, then that means rain or snow is on the way, for the same reason, cirrus clouds. So, that's just a little going into some of the weather tips without just saying it's good or bad or anything.
Yeah. Although, that kind of makes me think of, have you seen the weather rock?
No. What's that?
So basically, if the rock is wet, it means it's raining. If the rock is dry, it means it's sunny.
Yeah.
You don't know about the weather rock?
No, it could be dry at night too, and it wouldn't be sunny. Right? It's
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
I'll just send it to you. It's this whole there's a whole list of what if you see the rock, in whatever kind of situation.
Oh.
And it's stupid though, because you would already know all of that.
Yeah, and it's very low tech. You don't need a $1 million satellite in space if you just get the weather rock. Yeah,
it doesn't predict anything. It's just just is stating what is the result of what's
already happening. Yes. Yeah. Now there was another interesting one about meteors though. If you if you want to make something come true, or if you want to rid yourself of a disease or something, so say if you're poor, if you want some more money, if you say money 3 times just before a meteor comes in, I don't know how you would time that because a meteor only lasts for a split second, but maybe if it's a fireball and you can say that 3 times, then you're going to come into some money.
Oh.
So that's a good one I hadn't heard of. So you might want to try that.
Interesting.
You might want to try that.
Is that backed up by science?
That's definitely a scientific fact. I don't know.
So there's a couple other things too related to the Northern Lights. So that's like an atmospheric phenomenon, not so much astronomical. Well, I guess it can kind of be related. But people always refer to that as, oh, the sky is in flames. But in Chinese and Japanese cultures, this is kind of something interesting because I didn't realize that they could see the Northern Lights from, it seems kind of low, but anyways, they believe that a baby conceived under the Northern Lights will be beautiful and lucky. And it is also believed that they'll be like blessed with really good fortune and good looks. And yeah,
I've heard that.
Yeah. And so apparently when there's like a lot of solar activity, there's like a surge in Japanese tourists around like the Northern Lights area.
Yep, that's good. They should get out there, not just to see the Northern Lights, but for that reason too.
And then there's like an old kind of Icelandic folklore, I guess, that believed that the Northern Lights ease the pain of childbirth. And so they would kind of bring their pregnant women who were about to give birth up to see the aurora borealis. They also, interestingly, they believed that if you were pregnant and you were looking at the aurora, you would have cross-eyed children. So,
that was like the eclipse. That's not good.
Right. So basically, it's like, don't look at them, but have your baby under the Northern Lights.
No, yeah. Put some shades on or something, so that you won't see them. You can still be out there and not looking at them. Yeah.
So let's end the show with a couple of kind of how do we, are any of these superstitions actually harmful? Do you think?
No, I think they're pretty much all man-made. Just the mere fact that 13 in one culture and 4 in another culture, like walking under a ladder, unless the ladder falls on you, they're not harmful.
Yeah.
The meteor on the right or left, I mean, that's just so silly.
Yeah. So science actually says that, what they believe is kind of what makes superstitions, what they are kind of these illusions of causality. So it has a lot to do with like bias and kind of developing some kind of causal connection between two events that are actually unrelated. And so there is these ones that we talked about today are not harmful. You can go ahead and make a wish upon a star if you want to. But there is, if you go too far, sometimes these kinds of illusions can underlie pseudoscience and can, it is believed to be the basis of superstitious thinking. And in some ways, it could have some disastrous consequences in terms of your health, finances, well-being, things like that. So all of these, I think we talked about, were pretty fun, but it could be worse, I guess. And so we do have to be careful and do have to kind of continue to employ scientific thinking and logic to make sure that they don't lead us astray. Bernie, what is one thing that you would like listeners to take away from today?
Well, since we talked about northern lights and meteor showers, so one connection I just made right now, they both happen at about the same place, so 70 miles high. And they're generally good, of course, to see. I mean, there's supposedly bad aspect, but just the physics of it is kind of interesting that they happen about 70 miles high. They can be seen from astronauts on the space station way below them, and we're seeing them above us. Northern lights even make sounds. I talked to people who have heard the sounds. Meteors obviously can come in and cause a sonic boom if it's not just part of the meteor shower, if it's a big chunk of rock. So you can hear sounds, and that can be really dangerous. That's beyond superstition. That could actually hit you in the head, which is, of course, you're more likely to win the lottery than get actually hit. But people on Earth have been hit by actual meteorites, so that can happen. So that's beyond the superstition. So just some of the connections, and generally these things are very good to look at, and most of the superstitions really aren't, very meaningful, unless you believe in them. So.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll have a lot of listeners now going up to see the Northern
Yeah.
Lights and trying to have their babies there.
Right. And start counting stars and all that.
Well, thank you, Bernie.
Mhm.
You have been listening to Scientifically Speaking here on WMPG with myself and Bernie. Stay tuned for Something for the Weekend with Anella. And from your favorite nerds, just a reminder to vaccinate, to mitigate, and then we can all congregate.